So welcome to my channel. If you haven't watched my other videos, I do a lot of like front end development and I do a lot of live stream as well. And I've been talking about trying to build a full stack tutorial with you guys a lot. So here we are finally building a full stack application, and it's going to be a lot of fun because we have like a really nice UI that we are going to build, and it's going to look exactly like Twitter. And so some of the technology we're going to be using are React on the front end, Node.js on the back end, Mongodb for database, and we're going to use a little bit of Firebase to store our profile images. So it's a little bit better that way. So a lot of good practices we're going to be doing. And if you're new to web development, or if you don't know React, if you don't know Node, if you don't know MongoDB, it's totally fine. We're going to go over all of that together. And it's going to be a great learning opportunity for people who haven't done a full stack application, but who also do full stack on day to day. This could be a really fun project as well. So before we dive into the code, I'm going to show around our application, what we will end up doing. So I have a few profile. I already made some tweet. It's going to be like a Harry Potter theme. Like, I'm a big fan of Harry Potter, so bear with me if you don't like Harry Potter for some reason. I don't know, but yeah, I will use a lot of Harry Potter example here. So Harry P is like a Harry Potter, and we're gonna sign him. He have a account with this application, so sign in. Let's ignore this web browser comment. So you see he's on the home page right now, and he have like a user handle, and you can write some tweet here. If you press tweet, it's gonna tweet that. And then there's a couple user. Hermione is already here, Ron is here. They're all looking for Harry. Hermione is looking for both Harry and Ron. So if you go to Hermione's profile, you can see Hermione's tweet. I'm following Hermione right now. Let's see Ron. I'm also following Ron, I see. So Ron have one, Harry 2 likes in there. If I unfollow Ron and I go back to homepage, Ron is not there anymore because I'm unfollowed him. Now if I go to explore, I can see Ron is there. So explore is basically all the user. So Ron is there, I'm not following him, I just unfollow, so I'm gonna follow him back again. And then I go in here, I can go to the profile as well. So Harry Potter profile, you don't have any tweets, so it's not showing anything. There's also an edit profile button where you can click, you can upload profile image, you can also delete account if you want. And on the right hand side is basically static. Like, I didn't implement this feature yet, but it's if you like, you guys can go ahead and do that after you're done with the tutorial, because once you finish building this, you will have an idea of how to do this. So I kept it static for now, and this is static as well. We have a feature, we didn't implement it yet, so that's that. But most of the feature are about the tweet and the profile following, unfollowing stuff. So let's go and make a tweet. Let's say I am at Hagrid's, come find me, and then tweet. So Harry Potter tweeted, I'm at Hagrid's, come find me. And yeah, let's log out and let's log back in as a new user. Before we do that, let's go to the profile. You can see Harry Potter have like a tweet less than a minute ago. You can also see when the tweet was made. So 2 days ago, 3 days ago, less than a minute ago, and then after a minute passes, it will update itself as well. So that's that. Let's create a new profile and see how that works out as well. So we log out. Let's go back to this sign in page, and then I create a user called Dobby, right? Dobby from Harry Potter. Again, Dobby, sign up. So we have a user, we create a user called Dobby. Let's go to the profile. Let's upload a profile picture for Dobby. I have a profile here. Uploading 100%. Profile picture uploaded. Dobby is not following anyone, so it's empty right now. If you go to explore, let's see, oh, Harry Potter, Master Harry Potter is here. Let's follow him. Let's go back to Hermione, follow her as well. Let's go to Ron, follow Ron as well. Now if I go back to homepage, you're gonna see all of their tweets. And then let's say Dobby is free, right? Tweet that, and you have Dobby is free. You can like your own tweet as well, just like Twitter, you can do that. So yeah, when you go to explore, you can see Dobby is free here. But yeah, that's how it works, and a lot of cool feature we're gonna implement, and it's gonna be a lot of fun building this. And before we dive into the tutorial itself, the lessons are gonna be separated into the backend. We're gonna build the backend first, then we're gonna do the front end, and then we're gonna connect both of them together. And before we dive into that tutorial one more time, I want to say, take this moment and say, like, if you are new to this channel, make sure you subscribe, because 90% of viewers are not subscribed to the channel. So please do make sure you subscribe. It helps me grow, and it's also helped me bring this awesome tutorial to you guys and teach you guys all this cool stuff. So make sure you do all that, like, comment, subscribe, tell me what kind of tutorial you want to see in the future, what should I clone, and also let me know how you like the tutorial after you finish it, and put it on the resume, show it to the recruiter, get a job, all that. It will be really nice to hear some stories like that. So without further ado, let's jump right into the code. So before I do the backend code, I want to show you a quick diagram. It might not make sense right now, but I just want to give you a brief overview of what it's going to look like. Once we build a backend and we have all this separated, we're going to come back to this diagram one more time, and you're going to understand this so much better. But for now, this is how it's going to look like. Node backend, we're going to build a backend with Node.js, and in that we have an index.js file, we have a route folder, we have a controller folder as well. So in the index.js, we're gonna have our endpoint. Once we hit the endpoint, we're gonna have a couple of requests for that route. So API/user, we can have a get request, we can have a post request if we're creating a new user, we can have a lot of different requests, we can delete user as well. So all of this will be living in this route. So when we go over the endpoint, it's going to go over to this folder. The route folder is going to have something like user route.js, and it's going to contain all the route for that user endpoint. And that user going to have some functionality, right? When you do a endpoint get request, you're going to run this function. That function is going to live in a controller file. So it's a little bit more managed and nicely like put together, so you don't have to scramble on where things are. Just to keep in mind, it might not make sense at all. I totally understand until we dive into the tutorial. So right now I'm on the VS Code, and I'm inside a folder called Twitter clone. In here, I'm going to create a folder called server. In this server, we're going to do our backend coding, of course. And let's start with that. So we're going to go into, open up the terminal, go into the server folder, cd the server. Once we are inside that, I'm going to create npm init-yes. So initialize our npm project. So you have a package.json. In order to build a backend with Node, we need Express. So Express is a backend framework from Node that help us build servers and APIs. So I'm going to install that Express. And at the same time, I'm going to also use a package called MERN that kind of work with Express. So we don't have to restart the server every time we change something. The server is going to restart itself. So that package kind of helps us with that. So those two are installed right now, and we should be ready to build some initial stuff in here. So let's start with the app index. So in here, I'm going to create a folder called index.js. Make sure it's inside the server file. So there we have it. So first thing first, I don't want to use the require. I think on the node, do with the require import, but I want to use the ES6 import. So for that, I'm going to create something called type, and I'll do node module. So type, and then module, right? Instead of common.js. By default, it's using the common.js, which usually you do like the express equal to require express. I don't want to do that. I want to go with the new ES6 import. So I change that to type is module. So that way I can do import express from express, just like you do on the React front end. So it's a little easier that way, and I think it works out pretty good. So next you do is const app. As you go to Express, so we initializing our Express in here that we're going to be using app to do any kind of Express execution. So after that, we are going to be doing is listen, and we're going to be doing a port. Let's name it 8000, right? And then we're gonna have this one. We're just gonna do a console log. So listen, and then we're gonna do console log. Let's say listening to port 8000. By the way, I have like a automated plugin installed to my VS Code, which is called tab 9, I believe. So right here, tab 9 AI autocomplete for JavaScript, Python, TypeScript. So whenever I type, you will see it automatically complete some of this text for me. So listening to port, and it automatically told me 8000. So that was done by that plugin. So you can go ahead and install that. It's totally free, and it's automatically imports some stuff for you. It's a little easier to do things, so just to keep in mind. So once we have that, we're going to be, you can actually start our server by doing this, but I'm going to be using NodeMon for that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a script here called start. In here, we're going to do NodeMon index.js and then comma to make sure we are separating the script. So after that, npm start, listening to 8000. So our port is working as expected, which is awesome. Let's create our app.get just to test things out a little bit, you know, like let's see how it's working so far. And we're gonna send a response dot send hello, right? So let's open up our browser since it's working. So localhost, let's do 8000. We have a hello, right? So once we click that, we have a hello right here. So it's working perfectly. Our get request is working. So get request, whenever we're trying to get some data from our server, and it's sending me this text data to my browser once it's done completing the request. So that's that. We have that in place. So remember, we have a diagram, like a nice diagram that I created before. We're going to be using that a little bit to make things a little easier. So, oops, we have routes and a controller. So we're going to go ahead and create that folder in our server. So we have routes, and then we also have controller. And then we also going to have another folder called models. This is where our data is going to live. Models going to be outside that. So controllers, models, routes. And then model is going to have all our data. When we connect with our MongoDB, it's going to have that data in there. So before we go and create any route, like let's finish up with the MongoDB setup. I think that way we will be able to manipulate data right after while we are making our route. So I think that's a little easier way to connect things. I'll do is I'll go to MongoDB. So I'm going to sign in here. So mongodb.com, you sign in. So once you're signed in, you can create a new project, which I'm going to do right now. So create new project. We'll call this tutor clone, like that. A project owner is me. Create project. Build a database. So we need to be using the database. I'm going to go with the free shared one here. It's totally free if you have an account. And then I'm going to do is cluster 0 is okay. I can rename it tutor cluster, create cluster. So once you are done with creating a cluster, they're going to give you a password and username. Make sure you copy that password, save it somewhere safe, because we will be needing that password in a little bit when we are trying to connect our MongoDB database to our Express application. So do that and make sure you create user. That user has been created with that password. And we're gonna do is 0.0.0.0 for our entry of IP address, just a default one, and then we're gonna do finish and close. So that all about it. I don't want to do anything. Go to the database. And while it's generating, we need a package to connect our MongoDB with our Express. So I'm going to install that in a separate terminal. I cd to server here as well, and then npm install mongoose. This is package that connect MongoDB to our Express. So and also help us create a database in our server as well. So once it's been generated, what you're going to do is we're going to come in here and say connect our database. I'm going to select connect your application. You can also use different ways to connect your application. I will use this simple native driver, and then I'm going to make sure we have Node installed, of course, otherwise we won't be able to create that. So I'll go ahead here, copy this, and I'll create a file here called .env. I'll paste it here. I'll also name this something, so just in case we have, we are referring to that. So we can do is Mongo is equal to that whole thing. So see, you have a password in here. That's the exact password we copied a little bit earlier. Paste it here. Once you're done, I will go back to my index. So once I'm done with that, I'm going to come over here and install one more packages on the server. It's called npm install -D, and it's called .env. And capital D basically going to install as a dev dependencies instead of the regular dependencies. We have that in. What that does is help us read this env file in here. So I'm going to go back to that, cancel that out, and then here I'm going to bring that dependencies in as well. So I'm going to here import .env from .env. I'm also going to import the mongoose we just installed. So it's brought me here, and here I'm going to do is .env.config. So initialize the config for the .env so we can read whatever in this file is here. So once we are done with that, what we can do is we can connect our MongoDB application using the package mongoose and using the initializing stuff that we kind of pasted here under the name Mongo with capitalizing all those letters. So const connect is equal to a function here, and we're gonna bring in mongoose.connect. And in here, connect, we're gonna do process.env.mongo, right? That's coming from this env file. We have a kind of like a variable named Mongo with all capital, and that have everything we copy pasted from this, replacing our password as well. So it should be working. Once we have that done, we wanna do a handling of the promise. We're gonna do a function, let's say call CLG, and call connected to MongoDB database. If there's any issue with that, we're gonna do .catch and console.log, or let's just throw an error for now. The error. So there's that. I'm gonna have that inside here. So we are basically connecting our MongoDB server in here. We are calling mongoose, connecting with our initialization, all the data, our username and password, and then it's going to handle whatever happened in here. If the promise goes through, it's gonna give us this. If it catches an error, it's gonna go through that. So we need to do that when we're connecting our server. So I'm going to recall that connect function here. And let's go back to our server. Let's see if it connected properly. Look like it's having some options, switch back to false by default, show where the warning was created. So we have like a warning that says strict query option will be switched back to false for some reason. But so we can do this on here, right? Let's see, we're not gonna get that warning anymore. So to fix that warning, we're just going to kind of get rid of the strict query mode they have set up. That's a new problem you might face if you install an older version of MongoDB. You might not see that problem since we're almost 6.8. I think 6.7 doesn't have that problem. So make sure you kind of like initializing that before we connect that. So we got rid of that warning. Yes, that's it. So we have that connected. We officially have our Express backend connecting with our MongoDB database, which is awesome. In the database, we don't have anything yet. It's empty collection in here. So let's start building kind of our database, what we're going to store in the database. For now, we're going to do something like a user, right? So very simple user in here. So let's start, call a file called user.js. And in our file, we're going to import mongoose. And then we're going to call something called user schema. Here, we're going to initialize the mongoose schema. Mongoose, new mongoose.schema. So we are basically initializing the schema. This is kind of telling our MongoDB that this is how our data going to look like. And it's going to look something like this, username. We're going to have something called our username in here. And it's going to have a type of string. It's going to be required true, and it's also going to be unique as well. So we can have two Harry Potter in the same application. It's going to be unique in that sense. I have long curly braces there. So yeah, so we want to have a username that is a value or type of string. It's required, it's always required. That means if we don't give it, it's not gonna process the request. And we have a unique is true because you don't want to have same username be able to create a couple of times. So that's that. Then we're gonna have something called email type string, required true and unique true as well. And then we're gonna have a password. See, that plugin kind of like giving me some option that I can use. Password going to be just a type of string in here. And we're gonna do required true as well. And then we're gonna have a profile. And let's say profile is, this is going to be a profile picture, right? So we're gonna have, every user gonna have a profile picture. And it's just going to be type of string because it's going to be a URL. And then we're going to have followers. Now this is where it might be a little tricky to understand, but I want to make sure we have a follower of array because we want to store ID of each user into an array. So we know who's following who, and we're going to kind of separate that into and add it into our application as well. So we're gonna have an array, and every array is going to have an ID of each user who are following, and then we're gonna have a default value of empty array. We're gonna have the same thing again, but this one is gonna be following. So who I'm following, kind of like the same values, and we're gonna have a description. This is going to be description of, let's say, the user. Maybe they want to have something written in our profile. Now we might not be using all of this in our front-end feature, like description. I'm not sure we're gonna add that, but we can easily add that on our profile view profile page. And this is how our user is going to look like. Last but not least, I'm gonna also need some timestamp. So the MongoDB create a timestamp when we kind of initialize this user. So if the user is created right now, there's going to be a timestamp of the time when user was created. So that's been done by MongoDB. So pretty cool feature. So once we have that, just to recap, we are creating our user database structure in here, which is called a schema. So MongoDB kind of like structure is going to look like. You're going to have username, email, password, profile picture, followers, following, description. So once we have that, we want to export that because we want to use that in our controller. So when we're creating a request, get this user, we want to use this to get that user from our database. So we want to export that as export default mongoose.model, and in here we're gonna name this user, and then users pass in the user schema, so which is basically the schema that we created over here. So we have our user on the way. That's pretty cool. And let's start with our route here, and we're gonna start implementing controller pretty soon. So let's on the route we're gonna have something called user.js, and in here we're gonna have all the route for our user. Again, we want to import express in here, so import express from express, right? And then we're gonna create something called router, which is coming out of the express, capital ROUTR. So, and we're bringing in just a router from express, and this is the router we're gonna be using in our API. So like I said on the diagram, this is what we are creating right now. Basically, we are in the route folder and we're creating our first user route. So we're gonna be connecting these two shortly. So right here, I'm gonna create a get request just to see how it's working, and then request response. And so every time you paste in do a request, the function, all the middleware, basically have like a request and response, because we're going to be always working with these two things. Response is we're going to send things to our browser when it requests for something, and request is basically we're grabbing some information from the browser, from the user side. So that's out of the way. Let's do some send. User, you are in user route doing get request, right? And then after that we want to export this router too, so export default router. So we're exporting all the router in here. We can create as many router as we can, and we are exporting just a single one, so it have all of them internally. So once we have that, we're going to be bringing this over here to connect with our index.js. So our server knows what to do when we hit that get request, right? Right now, they don't have any relationship. We're gonna make that happen. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna first bring in that route. So import user route from, let's see, we wanna go to route/user.js. With the type module, you want to always use the extension here. I'm not sure if they updated it, but with the older version of using the type, you want to always specify this extension, otherwise it will throw an error. So we want to have that extension in here. Once we have that, we want to do is app.use. So when we go to, let's say, API/users, we want to use that user route that we kind of imported from here, from the routes. So we have that. We have the get request. That means when we do this request in here, it's going to hit that. Now, before we start testing with our API, we want to have an application that we use to test this API, and it's called Postman. If you don't have this installed, you can go ahead and download it. They have a Windows app, Mac app, and Linux app. And once you have that download, we can use that to kind of test our APIs, because we don't want to. You can test it on the browser, but it gets really tedious and time consuming. Like we can do this, for example, and it will return whatever we return here, right? Oops. So we do a get request, and it says you're in user router doing get request, which works pretty cool. We'll change that. So then again, there, you are in user router doing get request. That means whatever we did over here is working perfectly. So we connected this with our route successfully and it's working out great. And but we don't want to go through our browser, refresh it all the time to test certain things. And because browser doesn't, when you are doing the request, browser doesn't give you that option to send in some of those data other than by creating a form. So we don't want to do that. We want to test it right away. So in that case, download the Postman. Once you download, come back and we will start testing our API. So once you are in the Postman, you have it download. I have the dark mode on. Your might look a little bit different. You can turn on the dark mode, go into the settings. So right now we have something like this. What I'm going to do is create a collection and call it tutor clone. So we are building that. So once you create the tutor clone, we're going to create a request. Well, let's create a folder first because let's create a folder called auth. So we are doing all authentication. We are signing up user, creating new user in here. We're gonna create a request called sign up. So in here we're gonna be signing up new user, and we're gonna start testing different things. But we tested this on the browser. We can also test that in here as well. Let's say example request in here, and copy paste this URL. Once we do send, you can see it sended that same text in here. So whatever we are sending it, the response we're going to be getting back will be down here. And we also can do some authorization. We can see how many tokens we have. We can send some data using the body as well. We're going to do that in a little bit. So once we have that set up, let's jump into our code and start building our user API. So we created some kind of user API. I think we are not going to be doing that because first, in order to do any kind of interaction with user, we need to create a user. So like I said, we created a file called auth and sign up. We're going to do that first. We're going to sign up our user first, and then we can come back to user and kind of like play around. We can get some specific user. We can edit some data of the user. We can delete the user on our user, but we're gonna keep things separate. So I'm gonna create a file called auth.js, and in here we're gonna sign up our user. So here I'm gonna do the same thing again. I'm gonna type express from express, and then const router is equal to express dot router, initialize that router, and export default router as well. And in here, we're gonna do is router dot post request because we're gonna be creating a user. You want to use a post request, and we're gonna go to sign up. And then we're gonna create some function request response, and then we have some functionality that we can work with when user passing some data in this API route. So post get request is every time you use when you're trying to get some information. Post request is you use when you are posting some data. So for example, if you have a form and you usually sign up, if you go to Facebook, if you go to Twitter, if you sign up your profile, you have a form, you fill it up, and then you press enter. When you enter, it basically does a post request to a specific route in the server. So it carries your username, password, and data, and then it posts it here. And here the functionality is where we create our own user into our database. So we're gonna do that, but before, let's connect into our application as well. So import routes from routes/auth.js. And here we're gonna use that in here as well. We're gonna create, here is auth and user with the auth route here. So we have that connected. Next, I also talked to you guys about something called a controller. So we created this, right? So we have this, we have a request, get request, post request, whatever. And then you have this URL route, and then we have a function, right? This is the function that we are talking about here. We want to have it in a separate place because if we have a lot of route and then we have a lot of functionality, this get really complex and all over the place. So we want to have that function in a separate folder. We keep it in a separate place so it's easy to navigate around our application. So in the controller, we're going to create some function in here, and then we're going to name it auth.js as well. So I think I'm going to use a plural in here just in case, so we separate this two. So in the auth.js, we're going to create a function in here. So we're in controller, we're going to bring in the user. So user from model.user.js. Make sure you do the JS. So once we have the user, we're going to create a function here, and we're going to export using const. So sign up. It's going to be same thing. It's going to take in request and response because it's exactly the same functionality that we're going to be using. So once we have that, we already exported it, and let's go back to our auth and we import it here instead of that, instead of this request response over here. So sign up is imported from that. Make sure you do the JS at the end. So we have it ready. So we have all those three parts tying together so far. We have our index.js using the app.use, and then routes. We're going to the routes. Oops, let's double it here. We're going to routes. We have a functionality that lives in the controllers, and it's a neat way to point things up. So everything in here will be in the controller, so we can find what's happening in here, and we will be working with users. So without further ado, let's get started on the user creation side of things. We're gonna need a few more things in here. So let's install some of the packages. I was showing an error for some reason. That's not a big deal. I mean, we're gonna fix all these errors soon. So let's do that. Oops, there, it's fixed. So a few more application or packages we need is npm install JSON web token. We're gonna use something called bcrypt, CRYPT JS, and cookie parser. So we're gonna see in a second what all of these packages does. It's basically JSON web token gives a token for you, token on the browser, so user can log in and log out. And so it's basically set up a cookie and then give us the access token that the browser knows what user is logged in or logged out. Bcrypt is basically hash your password. You don't want to store a complete password in the backend data in a Mongodb. So in here, when you're storing data, you want to be your password to be hash. If not, if someone hack your software, they're gonna be know your exact password. So we want to hash our password. A cookie parser is basically we need our application to kind of look for the cookie. If we don't have this installed, our Express server won't be able to read the cookie. So that kind of helps our Express. So those three packages installed, let's go back to our controller and write in our functionality. So first, when we do this, we want to basically what's happening right now is when we go to our sign up, when we go to, let's say, our index API, right? So we have some similar, we go to auth instead of the user, we go to auth, and then we go to, let's say, sign up after going to the auth. So we go to sign up after that. So that way, you know, like we're going to using the auth route. So basically API auth / whatever is in this route will be next. So sign up. When we go in here, we want to make sure we create a new user and the user get published on the MongoDB. Right now it's empty. So we don't have any user on the DB. So it created a user test for us because we added that MongoDB. We added this in here, the schema, but there's no user in here yet. So we're gonna go to our Postman and kind of test around with our controller here. So start doing this. We're gonna put everything in a try catch block. Because if we catch an error, we're gonna make sure we are catching that error as well. in here. So I can do is come here and do next. Next is a middleware. So if you're not aware of it, next is like an API middleware in here. So every time we are finished doing the sign up, we can do this as a next. So when we're done with this, we can go with next if it fails. So in here we can do is next error. So just in case if it's error, we're gonna go to the error after this next, and then for the try, where this is where the main things is happening. So first we want to get a salt for our password hashing. So what we do is we're gonna import bcrypt from bcrypt.js, and we also want to import JWT from JSON Web Token. We want to do is bcrypt dot gen salt sync. We're gonna use 10 length, and then we're gonna hash our password. So when you're sending stuff from here, it's going to be in the body. So we're gonna change that to JSON raw and JSON. So everything we sent in here is going to be in the request. So before we do anything, let's console log request request.body. We don't have anything. Before we do that, we want to make sure our Express server is able to read that. So for that, we want to have let's just say without that, what happens. Let's just see what happens without letting the Express server know that we have a JSON data. So let's say username, go to Harry P, we post that into the sign, and it says nothing is happening, and here it's undefined, right? So we did a console log, but why is doing undefined, right? Let's check that out. It should be in here. So every data we send, for example, if you have a form on a Facebook, Twitter website, you basically send using this post like this on the JSON. So we have that, but it's not showing anything. That's because our Express server doesn't know that we are sending them a JSON, or we are using a JSON data. So we want to here is to use app.use express.json, and basically now it knows we're doing some JSON work. And let's go through that again. So we do this again. Let's see what it was. We're not sending any data, so it's almost always loading. But here you see username Harry P. So we successfully kind of extracted the data from the form, and we have it in request.body. So we can make this work. So let's take that out just for the explanation. So let's go back to our auth again and start coding that hash. So hash is basically when you do a password. Let's say our password is Griffender. The hash basically is going to take that, kind of like changes into something like this weird. So we can store this into our database, and it keeps hash, so nobody knows what that password is, but we cannot store the exact password, because everyone will know our password is. So that's basically what hash is doing in here. They're changing into a different thing and it's kind of hashing it. So hash sync bcrypt.hash sync, we are going to be doing is request.body.password. So just like username, we're going to send in a password as well, and it wants password, and it's going to use a salt from before, and I'm going to change that into totally different thing. So after that, we're going to create our user. So we have our username and password, right, from our form data. So we're going to have something like this password here. Let's do something like this. For our logging purposes, we want to keep it easy, so I'm going to just do this. Kind of bad, but I don't want to forget our password for sure, so I want to keep it simple. So we have that, and create user, new user is equal to new, and then we're going to bring in our schema, right? We create a schema. We're going to put the new username and password into this user, and it's going to appear in here, our database. So we're going to bring in that user that we created in from the model. We're going to pass in request body. So whatever is present, and then take the password. So if you have a username, you have a description, we're gonna all be in here. But for the password, we're gonna pass in the hash. We don't want to pass in the exact password that's coming from the body, right? So we are passing in the hash. Everything else stays the same. So once we have that, we want to do is use a await. So we want to use async in here. And we're going to do await new user.save. So it's a time consuming task. So we want to use async await on that. And then we have a user save. So we have it saved. So let's do this one more time. But before we do that, let's also assign some cookies. So we talked about JSON Web Token, JWT. So we know that user have a cookie and they can sign in using that cookie, right? So we know it's gonna work, but before that, we wanna make sure we have the cookie as well. So I'm gonna do is const token is equal to JWT dot sign, and in here we're gonna do is we're gonna create an ID. So the MongoDB is going to create an ID for the user by itself using the underscore ID. So we're gonna take in that ID. So when MongoDB generate this user using our information, it's gonna create something called underscore ID. So it's a unique ID for that user only. We're gonna take that and use it to create our token. So for that, we're gonna do this, and then we're gonna do is we also let's create of like a kind of like a string that's going to take care of our JWT token, make it a bit more secure. So I'm going to go with env, and then I'll create something like JWT is equal to, let's say, some gibberish word here, whatever it is. It's kind of like secure your token a little bit. So I'm going to bring that in here, process.env.jwt. So once we have that, we have a token on hand, like a token here created by JWT. So when we're signing in, it's gonna have a cookie on our browser, and what we can do is we can response.cookie. We can send an access token to our browser. So access underscore token, and then we're gonna pass in the token, and we're gonna type in HTTP only is true. So once we create the user, this we're gonna send back to our browser. So our browser is going to have a cookie called access token, and it's gonna have something like that. And then we're gonna do a status. Let's do 200. And in that, we're gonna do is JSON. We're gonna JSON all our user. So we can do is new users or new user. So it's going to give us a user. So let's try that out, see how it works. So yep, one more time before I do all that. It might throw an error, it might not, but I just wanna do a review of what's going on. So we are salting. We're bringing in a salt from Brickgrip. We are hashing our password using that salt and our password that we're passing on the form. And then we're creating a user using that all the data that we pass in on the form, and then we are hashing the password. So this is basically creating a data in our MongoDB database. We want to make sure we pass in the hash password and not the real password. And then we save the data, which is saving it into the MongoDB. We're gonna see the changes in here. And then we're creating a token right after that. And then we're sending that token to our browser. So our browser know that this is a user. We can log this user in because this is the exact user that signed in. So we're kind of doing that in here. And if everything fails, it's gonna throw an error. So let's start with that. Let's type that in. It says email is required, or we did a required email, right? On the user, we did email is required. So let's do an email as well. harryp@gmail.com. So we have that on the server again. Refresh it, send it again. It's working. So this is pretty cool. And every time we wanna send data back to our browser, we don't want to send, let's say, the password, right? So we don't want to send data back to our browser using this, using response.json new user. We want to take that out, but it have the password right now. It's giving me our email, our username, our followers. This is the unique ID assigned by MongoDB, and it's also showing the timestamp created and updated at. So everything is perfect. Let's go back to our MongoDB, refresh it, and we can see our user is right there. So everything we have it in here on the Postman is actually being implemented in our exact browser. So pat yourself on the back, you got that right. Or pat myself on the back. I mean, we have that installed or implemented. Next thing we want to know, like I told you about, like we don't want to send the password, so we just take that password out, right? We can kind of like destructure it using something called _doc. So MongoDB have something called new user dot _ doc. So that store all the values. They have a lot of unnecessary values. We wanna just grab the document of the values of the user. So we wanna use the doc to grab a little bit of our value. So just to say that again, this is what it looks like. We have just one, let's create one unique user, right? Then so the doc is basically we are sending it back. So some of the unnecessary data is not included, so that's good. And then we're gonna extract the password from here, and everything else going to be on others, right? Others data, let's say. So password is extracted from here, and other data is extracted from here. So we are only going to be sending the others data in here. So let's create another user. Let's do a 2 just to fast things up a little bit. So see, the password is not there anymore because we kind of like extracted it out, and everything else is put in a separate variables, and we're sending that only. So that's kind of secure our application a little bit. When we're talking to the browser, we're not sending the password, we're sending them everything else, all the other information that we might need. That's all good. We have a couple of user in here. We might want to delete some of the user. So delete that right there. We also want to have a function that delete this user as well when we're interacting with the user in here. So far, I think the auth is working great. Let's type in our sign in. So we have our sign in user. We can sign in, make sure this user is in our database, and we can sign them in. So pretty similar stuff we're gonna do. I'm gonna copy paste this. See here, let's name it sign in. And I'm gonna remove that because we're gonna start from scratch on that. So for sign in, a very similar stuff. We're gonna find the user first. So when we're signing in, we want only the username and password. That's it. We don't want the email for that. Yeah, we can check that out from here. So we let's do a Postman. We go back here, create a new request called sign in, and here we are only going to be signing in the user. So here, let's say sign in. It's a post request as well. So we have that ready on the Postman to start experimenting with that. So in here, what we are going to be doing is finding that user from our database. So we are going to be going to our database, find that user using username, and we're gonna say is the password is right. If it's right, we're gonna sign them in. We're gonna attach a token to them as well, so the browser knows it's the same user. They can navigate to different pages. So that's how it's going to work out. So we do async await here. Await comes user is equal to await. So we're gonna bring in the user dot find one, which is a MongoDB method to find the user in our database. And then here we're gonna pass in username is equal to request.body.username. So we are checking in whatever the user passed in, and we are checking in with this. So we are finding them using that username. If it matches, is good, we can check the password right after this. So we can do if no user is found, we can return next, and we're gonna do some error handling in here. So I'm gonna create something called error.js, and in here let's do like a export const handle error is equal to status and message of the error, and then we do is we're gonna do a create an error, new error, and we're gonna pass in our status and our message in here. So error dot status equals to status, error dot message equals message, and then we're gonna return the error. So kind of like a little better way to handle our error, because we will be doing this a lot. So let's do that. So make sure we have a JS at the end on that as well. So it's there. And then we're gonna handle our error. We're gonna do is create a 404 error if the user is not found. And we're gonna do is user not found. So we have that, a little bit of error handling. You don't need to do that. You can like handle the error right here as well. But just to make things a little nice and easier to handle, since we will be doing this a lot. So I just create a separate error handler. But after that, if it's correct, we are going to check the password. If the username matches, we want to bring in the password and make sure the password is the same. Our const, let's say, is correct. We're gonna do is await bcrypt dot compare. So it's going to compare our password. So we're gonna do is request dot body dot password. So request dot body is basically coming from the form, and then we're gonna change with user dot password. So remember, we have our user as well. So let's make it a little bigger. So we have a user. We want to make sure user request dot body that's being passed on the form matches password with the user exact user password that we found using this. So that's kind of check. Let's also make another check in here. If no is correct, that means if the user password is not correct, we want to return next, and then handle error is 400, and then we're gonna create wrong password, and that should be good. But if it doesn't, if the password and username matches, what we are going to do is we're going to create a token again, just like before. And then we're going to type in sign. And we're going to do the ID as well. The user dot underscore I. And then we're going to pass in process dot env dot JWT. So we have that in here. So after that, we are going to be doing the same thing again. We'll send some data back to our browser. But this time, you also want to take out the password. We don't send the password by accident. The password, others data, it already knows. User dot underscore doc. We want to make sure we send cookie, and we'll call it access token is token. And then we are going to be doing HTTP only as well. And then we are going to be sending a status of 200, and we're going to be sending a JSON others data as well. If everything fails, you're going to throw an error with the next right there. So just to recap a little bit, sign up. We are creating a password, hashing that into our database. For the sign in, we are not doing that. We're just comparing our password. So we are bringing in the user with our username that the client typed in their form. Once we got that username, we want to make sure the username matches. If not, we throw an error. Then we're going to do is we're going to compare the password, make sure our password is exactly as stored in the database with our bcrypt. Because we already hashed the password, only bcrypt can compare that password. So we're bringing in bcrypt for that. Once the compare password passes, we are creating a token. If it doesn't, it throws an error. So create a token, which is basically a cookie for our browser. We send that cookie back to our browser along with our database. So let's test that out on Postman. So we have a sign in, we have a post. I'll do body raw, and then I'll create JSON in here, makes it a little bigger. So remember, we have user on the database, Harry P, and password were Harry P as well. So I'll do username Harry P, and then password also Harry P. So we do send. It's going through some error. Let's see what the error is about. Let's go back to our index. We see auth. Do we have the same auth? Okay. We have our routes from the auths. And let's see. Oh, we don't have that routes yet. So it's sending an error. Of course, that's a good way to test things out. So remember, I forgot to do that. So we're gonna make sure sign in. We create a route for that, and we bring in sign in from our controller. So if the route is ready to go right now, we shouldn't be having that issue anymore. So we have sign in there as well. So let's do that. Oops, user is not defined. Add sign in. So let's see what's the user is not defined. So this one right here, it should be user. So typo here as well. Make sure you probably check this. This happens a lot. I'm using that plugin. It automatically does some stuff for me. So it could be a little troublesome sometimes. So yeah, double check that. All right, cool. Now it should be good. So we have that going. So Harry Potter exists. And notice one thing on the send us a couple of things. Send us the body, which is this data. And then it's also send us a token. So access token. This is basically going to be in our browser. So if you are on Chrome, you can check that using inspect application, and the cookie it will be in here. So that's where things are, and this will be in the body, of course. So we can grab that from there and then use it in our application as well. So that's cool. We have that working. So our auth works exactly as we wanted. We can sign up user. Let's go back to that again, and let's just sign someone called Ron W. Oops. Ron W here. Password is Ron W. Let's create an user called Ron W. Ron Weasley. And then we check our database. There's a user named Ron Weasley, Ron W as well. Let's sign him up on this. We go to sign in route, and we go to Ron W, Ron, just to test things out, and we get his data back. What if we mess up the password? Oops, wrong password, which is good. What if we mess up the username, user not found, which is pretty good. It's working exactly how we want it. And yeah, so our authentication is good to go. Next, we do want to add some functionality with our user. So once we have auth, we have some user that we can work with. And here we're going to build in some functionality that we can work with our user. So first, create a controller as well for that. So we're going to do is user.js. So we have some controller, and in here we're going to do is we bring in the user, because if we're making some changes to the user, we want to have that user imported in here as well. So we have that user from model.js, and we can do some stuff in here. So let's first thing first, what we're going to be creating is we want to get. So when we're doing some get requests, we want to find some user. So what we want to do is we want to do get / find / ID, which is a params. In the parameter, we can grab the ID and then we can find some user. And in here, what we want to do is we want to bring in stuff from the controller. So cons from controller / user.js, right? So we have some stuff that we work on. And on the controller, let's say we have something like, we can do something called get user. So cons export cons get user. async that, and then we want to get some user. So we can do is try catch again. Then we're gonna do is next error in here, and here we're gonna do is const user again. We're gonna find that user. So await user dot find by ID this time, because we have an ID on the params, right? We have ID on the params, so we want to find that user using that parameter. And then because dot params dot ID, so whatever you write in here need to be going in here, just attaching the params. And then response dot status dot 200 JSON, we're gonna find that user and put it in there. So that's good. So let's save that and bring that in. So get user from controller. So we have that working. We should be good to go. So we have that user route as well. So let's on the Postman, let's create another folder. Let's create users, and in here let's create a request, get user, and in here we are going to be going through the same thing pretty much, but in here we'll do users. So let's see where are we going. So user slash find slash ID, right? So that's all we need. We don't need anything else. So we just find user by ID, because when we go into certain profile for user, we want to find that using that ID in our front end. So kind of helps us get some users that way. So in here, we're going to pass in this ID that's created by our database. So ID, and we should be getting Harry Potter's data, all the data that Harry Potter have. So we're getting that data back. So right here is this is where it's working. Oops, I kind of messed that user up. User, so user, so right here. So it's finding that, is going to our user schema database and finding using the params ID, which we are passing it to the URL, and is returning that data. So doing that exact. And then we have a run as well. So let's try that out. We have Ron's data as well. So pretty good. We have some stuff that we can work with here. So let's do, we want to delete an user, we want to update an user, we want to follow an user. So we want to make sure we have our followings and followers. We can put some, we can follow some user, and yeah. So there's going to be some logic in there. We want to make sure we understand that. And once you have that down, like how to follow, unfollow user, I think it becomes pretty obvious. So how to do the backend most of the time, it gets a lot easier. So let's dive into doing some updating users. So update, when you're doing update, we want to have put request, and in here we want to just do the ID. That's it, user slash ID. We don't need to find. So in here, when we are updating data, we need to do one more thing. We want to verify, right? You want to create a middleware in here that verifies that I'm the user that I want to update. So you can only update yourself, your profile only. You don't want to update other profiles. So we want to verify that. So in order to do that, we want to create a function called verify token. So I will do in a separate file to make things a little easier. So in that, we are going to make sure, like whenever we are logging in, that token is applied to our browser. So we want to make sure we want to grab that token and see if it matches with our user. So I'll import JWT again, because that's always work with token. And we also want to import handle error in case. I'll use the JS in that. So export const verify token. In here we're gonna do request response next. And here we wanna make sure our token is verified. So const token since it's going to be in the browser, right? It's going to be in the cookies. Like I said, if you're on the Chrome, let's not do this. Let's do this. If you're on the Chrome, it's going to be on the cookies slash here access token. So it's going to be inside the browser on the application. So you're going to grab that from there. So we want to do is request dot cookies dot access token, right? And then if there's no token, we don't want you to do anything. You won't be able to delete the user. You won't be able to update the user. So you want to throw an error right away. So next, handle error. I'm gonna call it 401. This is for a token error. You are not allowed, but it's like an AI generated, allowed to access this. I'll say you are not authenticated. So that's that. And if the token is there, if there's a token that exists on the browser, we want to make sure the token matches with the user that's logged in. So verify token process.env, they're bringing in the same env from JWT, and error user is going to be the user being verified. So if error, we want to return an error right away. This time is going to be 403 because the token error, the token is invalid, and we can do request user. So once, if it's verified, we want to attach a user to our browser, so then we can like work with it, right? So we want to use the user, attach the user to our request with our browser. So once verified, you're good to go. You're gonna have the user in the browser, and then we can work with that user, right? So then we do next. So that's kind of verify token. One more time, we are importing JWT and handle error from our previously created folder, and then we are doing a token from the browser. We are seeing if the token exists. If it exists, we go to the verification. If it doesn't, we throw an error. The verification basically bringing the same JWT that we have in the env, and have a function with the error and a user. If it's verified, we're going to attach that user to our browser. So request.user that we can use on the front end to do some work. So when we're building a front end, you want to make sure whenever we're using the user, it's coming from this verification place. So that's the verification process basically. So after that, go back to our user and kind of do the update. Let's go back to the user here and bringing the verification in here. So verify token that we created, and then we're going to create an update function that's coming from here. Update and verify function coming from that. Yeah. So update is coming from the controller. So here I will do same thing and call it update, and we're gonna do some stuff in here. So one more time again, we are verifying on the middleware on the router. So this is basically the middleware before it moves on to the update. So we want to make sure we verify. If it's verified, it goes to the next. This next is basically the update, and then we're gonna update the user. So let's jump right back into this. So we're gonna do is we're gonna check our ID. If the ID matches, we're gonna go to the update process again. Just an extra layer of security. Like we already verified it, but right now we want to match the ID just in case. Make sure my ID is the ID of the profile that I'm trying to update. So I'm only able to update my profile only. So extra bit of verification there. So params is basically coming from, again, coming from here. And then because user is basically that user we verified that's in the browser, attached to the browser. So we have that. But before we do that, we wanna get rid of this try catch. So if this happens, we're gonna do a try catch inside. Error, and there you go. We have that. So first we want to do is we're gonna get the user. So updated user is equal to await user dot find by ID and update. So our MongoDB have like a method called find user by ID and then update at the same time, which kind of makes things a little bit in shortcut. So we're gonna do that because we're gonna pass in the ID first, and then we're gonna pass in a method called set. So set is basically going to set everything that we have in here. In this case is going to be request.body, and then we want to only attach the new user onto the updated user. So in that case, we want to make sure new is equal to true. So what happening here, I know it can be a little confusing, but we'll go over this one more time. So what's happening here is you are checking if your user matches with the user ID that we verified. If it matches, you are able to do this, which is basically find the user by ID from the params, and then we kind of request that body. So everything inside the body could be a description, it could be a username, and then we kind of set this to our actual data that we have. So it's we overwrite, and we are in here, we are returning that new overwritten or newly updated data. So when we are let's say response.status in here, you're sending in the new data only, right? Updated user, we have that. The catches, we want to do the error, and else if everything fails. I think I'm doing it in the right spot. Let's see. If else right here, we want to return an error, so handle error, bring that, and we're gonna call it it's gonna be in the next as well. I'm gonna call it 403. I'm gonna call it you can only update your own account. Make sure our handler is imported. So we have this implemented right now, and before we try this out and test it on our Postman, we need to go through one extra step. That is, we need to remember when we did this over here, when we were checking on the ID route, we actually verified, then we went on to update. Now in the verified token, we are actually accessing our access token here from the cookies. So in order to do that, we need to configure something on our server so our server can read the cookies. So remember, we install something called a cookie parser. This is where we are going to be using the cookie parser. So you come to the index, and in here I'm going to import cookie parser from cookie parser, and in here we're going to update app.use cookie parser. If you don't do this step, our verified token won't be able to read the access token here, and it will cause us to run to an error. So we have that out and working. So what we can go now, we should be able to do this. So in here, let me bring up the Postman. So we have get a user, create another request, update user here. So have very similar things like that. And in here, we're going to do a put request. Instead of find, it's going to be straight to the user ID. So remember, we have Harry Potter. His user ID is this over here. So I'm going to bring that in instead of Ron Weasley's. So here, I'll bring that in. Now, in order to do that, we need to do two things. We need to remember over here on update, we are checking in the ID from our params and checking the ID from the user. If it's good, we should be able to update anything in here. And we are also verifying our token. So in order to do that, we need to sign in with Harry Potter first. So I went back to my sign in, post sign in, and Harry P, send. Once it's signed in, it's gonna give me our token. I'll grab that token, come in here on the header. So on the update user, I'll go to the header, I'll type in access underscore token, this is exactly the same thing as this over here. So just grabbing that and checking with our JWT, making sure it's verified. Once it's verified, it's going to go to the here and grab whatever is in here, which is the requested body, and it's going to set it to my Harry Potter user. So let's do one thing over here. We have on the model, remember on the user, we have a description. Let's update our Harry Potter user and add this description in. So let's grab draw JSON. And here I'll do description. All right. Let's just say bio goes here and just update it. So we have our token, we have our body. Let's do this. So we have a server, and we have our cookie running. Oh, rest status is not functioned. So I think I kind of misspelled something over here, like status. So we have right to spell right now. So let's do that again. So we see the new data is being returned, and the new data contains description goes here, which is perfect. So it's working. Let's refresh the real data and see if it's been updated there. There we go. We have it updated. So that route is working perfectly. I think we can kind of do this. Update user, get user, and next we want to do is delete user. So delete user. In here we're gonna do is router dot delete. So router dot delete, and we're gonna do pretty much the same thing. We're gonna go through the ID, and we also want to verify, because in order to delete we need to make sure it's the right account is delete, and then we're gonna do is delete user. That is coming from the controller, and go back to our controller. So in here we're gonna do some delete functionality. So let's copy paste this in here, and here we're gonna do is delete user, and let's change this. Let's say we're gonna keep this like exactly like that. Let's see, we're gonna have the try catch as well. So let's change this. In here we wanna send them user deleted, and in here we're gonna delete that user. So if the params match, just as we did with the update, we're gonna make sure it's the right user, have access to these functionalities. So we're gonna bring in user, find by ID, and delete goes to params dot ID. So we're gonna delete find user by this ID, and then delete that user. So once we have that, we should be good to go. User will be deleted, and it should work. So let's see here we have that up here. Let's go to our Postman one more time, and then create a new request, delete user. It's going to be same thing pretty much as here. Instead we're gonna do is delete. Let's try to delete run for now, because we are using Harry Potter for a lot of example. We're gonna keep that. So first thing first, we wanna log in. Run W. Or let's try deleting Harry P. I mean, it doesn't matter actually. So since we are logged in, but you need to be logged in, so you need to have that same header, otherwise it won't work, because we need to verify it. So I'm gonna copy this and make sure, okay, I'm still logged in, and then I have my user ID of the Potter, right? And then delete user deleted. Let's go back to our database. So Harry Potter is gone. We have Ron Weasley right now. We have the delete working as well, pretty straightforward. Next, what we're gonna do is we're gonna do some follow and unfollow functionality. So remember, we have right here followers following. If we want to make sure we're going to create Harry Potter, so Harry Potter can follow Ron can follow Harry. You can unfollow them as well. So Yep, this is the Twitter functionality that's going to come in here. So let's create something called follow put. So we are updating our data here, follow, and then we're gonna do is ID, and then verify token as well. We want to make sure we are able to, we are logged in to do that. So we are verifying as well. And then follow here, that comes from our controller. Go back to our controller. I will just copy paste this again, and I'll just do follow. Nice, right? So we have that in there and working. Now we need to do is like get that functionality in. You're not going to be using the if else anymore. So delete that, delete that. So try catch, follow. Here we need to do a couple of things. We want to get the user that we want to follow, and we also want to get the current user. So if Harry is logged in, we want him to be here, and Ron need to be go here. So Harry can follow him, and in his followers, Harry is going to be added. So if Harry is logged in, he want to be able to follow Ron, and in Ron's database, he have something called a followers. So in here, Harry is going to be added, and in Harry's database, Ron's going to be added in the following. So it's kind of like the Twitter functionality we're talking about. So on the user, let's grab the user, which is going to be done using the ID here. So if we're trying to follow him, his ID, we need to go to his profile. His ID should be there on the params. So there you have his ID from the params. So let's go user is equal to 08 user.find by ID, because just param.id, and Harry is going to come in from, let's do const current user and 08 user dot find by ID. This time he's coming from the body, so body is where his the logged in user is. So let's say we need to create a user first, so we have to go through the process of right here. Let's do Harry P and here. So we have Harry signed up. He's signed up. So in here, I'm going to show you one more time. I mean, I want to explain as much as I can so you guys understand. So Harry is logged in, for example. He's going to be in here, and he want to follow Ron. When he clicks on the follow button, Harry will be added into the followers here, and in the following case, Ron ID will be added. So we know he's following Ron, so we can keep track of who's following who Ron, how many followers does Ron have, and things like that. So yep, that's one thing we are going to keep track of. So we need both the user in this case, and let's write our logic. So if so let's say followers, if user dot followers dot includes request dot body dot ID. Now we'll go through this logic one more time. So if Ron, for example, so Harry is trying to log in and follow Ron. If we have Ron followers, if Harry is in here, we are not going to be do this following. If he doesn't exist on the followers, we are going to be adding Harry in because he's trying to follow Ron. So, and his following will increase as well. So again, I'll push in this logic right now. So here, what we're going to do is user.update1. And in here, we're going to do is we're going to push, since we are working with array, we need to push on the followers. We need to push Harry's ID, right? Oops, because .body.id. So in here, so let's go back. So in here, we are adding Harry's ID in here, and then we are going to do is add a logic which Harry's following. Ron's going to be added, so he's following Ron, right? So current user dot update one, and in here we are going to do the same thing as well. We're going to do push because it's an array, but this time it's going to be in the following. So we have following, and in the following we are going to do is equals dot params dot id. So Ron's id is in the params, so this is the Ron's id. User we are trying to follow, so he's coming in the following, and Harry's id is going into the followers for Ron. So that's does it. So we are using user for the Ron, Harry for the current user. So we have that. So it should be working out great. And in here we wanna do is we're gonna get rid of this, and we're gonna, so here what we're going to do is we're going to do the else statement. So else res.status. So this, if Harry exists, that means we can follow him. We already follow him. So we're gonna do an error, and we're gonna do is JSON you already follow this user, and if it passes through, then we should be able to good to go. Status 200 dot JSON, and we're gonna do is following the user. So perfect. So once we have this ready, what we're going to do is we're going to jump back into our Postman and test this out. Hopefully it's going to work exactly as we want. Remember we have to provide, let's create a request. Let's create a request first, called update follow user. And here is going to be similar to this. We are doing a push request. So here you can see we have users, and then we go to follow/id. So we're gonna do is follow users follow/id. Now we're going to be logged in as Harry, and then we're gonna grab that token. We're going to come to our headers, and here is the access token, and then type that in. And we're gonna follow Ron's. So let's check Ron's ID out. Here we have it. And then we're gonna do is we need one more thing. We need to pass in our ID, so body.id. So in that case, we're going to be passing as a JSON. So ID will be of Harry's. So in here is Ron ID, and in here is going to be the Harry's ID. So we know we have our current user is Harry, who's trying to follow Ron. So let's grab Harry's ID over here. So now we should be good to go. So let's try this out and see if it's working. So send, following the user. Let's go back to our database and see if it's making sense. So on Ron's followers, we have Harry's ID, and on Harry's following, we have Ron's ID. Perfect. Exactly how we want it. So we have we know who's following who. We can like differentiate that with our database right now. So it's an array. We have like the first array. So pretty cool. We have that working. The next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna do exact opposite of this, which is basically unfollow. We're gonna unfollow users. So here, let's do this. Let's duplicate that and create something called unfollow, and then pass that into our controller, and we're gonna create something called unfollow, and then very similar thing, exactly like that. We're gonna do is unfollow instead of follow, and here we are bringing in unfollow, right? So that is out of the way. We should have that. It's time to kind of verify the logic. Here is a very similar logic. Only thing we are going to be doing is we're also going to have two users in here, and we're gonna do is like if the following includes, let's say if the current user followings include the opposite, like request.params.id. So if Harry is following Ron, then we can unfollow him, right? If not, we don't need to. So if current user, which is Harry, is following Ron, which is params, what we're going to do is update once, but this time instead of push, we're going to do is pull. We're going to pull that out of the array, and we're going to do is request.params, request.body.id. So if Harry is following Ron, we're going to pull Ron followers, and we're going to go to the wrong followers and delete Harry's ID. And same thing we're going to do in here is we're going to pull Ron ID from the params, from the following, right? So just the opposite logic of what we did over here. It kind of makes sense. And yeah, let's see. If it fails, that means you are not following this user, and then unfollowing the user. So that is how it works. If you didn't understand the logic properly, you can replay the video. I think it's very straightforward. And let's jump back into our Postman, and do is unfollow user. And here we can just copy paste that. It's a pretty same thing. We're doing a put request here. Instead of that, we're doing unfollow. So let's go back to our header, right? So it's the same thing. We're gonna keep that. So Harry is logged in with that token, and in the body, we are going to pass in Harry's ID. So we know Harry is the user from the ID. So you grab that, and we are trying to unfollow Ron. The Ron ID is here. Let's type that in. Unfollowing the user. This should all disappear. So I'm gonna refresh it. So on the Harry following, there's no following. On Ron's followers, there's no followers. So successfully worked. All our user logic, I think, is pretty well defined right now. So we have update user, get a user, delete a user, follow and unfollow a user. It's all good. Most of our users are ready to go. Next thing we're gonna do is start making tweets. We're going to make sure how to post a tweet, how to do all the tweet logic, like delete a tweet, like a tweet. You can also get all tweet. We want to make sure we can get all our user tweet. You can also get a explode tweet. So when you go to the explode tab, we were able to get all the tweets from all the user, even from the ones that you're not following. So it's kind of like an explode tab. So a lot of other functionality around tweet, and well, let's get started on that. First we're gonna do is we're gonna create a database for tweet. So I'll create a new file here called tweet.js. And before I do that, I want to make sure we understand that one more time. So I hope we have a clear idea on this. We have some user route doing on the routes, and then we are putting the functionality on the controller. I think once you understand this, it's a little easier. So the more arranged you are on your server side, the better control you have on things. So I really emphasize on this diagram. If you understand this, you'll have a better grasp of where your things are and how to keep track of things. And so that's the purpose of the diagram. I think this is where I'm going to stop reverting to this diagram. I think we are good on this one. So again, user route. We have a route in here that have a functionality which lives in the controller. It's kind of like all tied together. And yeah, without further ado, let's jump right into our schema for tweet. So we create a schema for user. This time we're going to do the same thing for our tweet. Import mongoose from mongoose. And then here we're going to write this tweet schema. Go to new mongoose schema. So we're going to describe a little on the tweet side. So tweet will have a couple of things. The first one is a user ID. So who is the user who made the tweet? So type would be string. and this would be a required one for sure. Then we have our description. This is where basically the text for the tweet is when we type string. Required is true, and max is a character. I think the Twitter right now have a maximum character of 280. It was less before, they kind of increased it. So we're gonna go through that rule as well. So tweet, you can only have 280 character. To come with creativity on that. And then type is array. So we can keep track of who liked the tweets and all the user. So we can do push pull method. Default value would be empty string, and we're gonna have a timestamp as well. Timestamp is equal to true. So there we have the tweet schema, and we're gonna export that on our function export default mongoose.model. We're gonna type in tweet. Here we're gonna do is tweet schema. So we have our tweet ready to go. If we refresh it, I think it should expand on that, or we haven't created it yet. So let's we have that ready to go. So next we're gonna do is we're gonna create some route for the tweet. So tweets.js, and the controller is going to be a singular tweet.js. So we have those created, and let's do one thing over here on the routes. To import express from express, not expression. And then we're gonna do is const router is equal to express dot router, and we're going to export that router as well. So there, export default. So we have exported that out, and then we're going to do is we're going to bring that into our index and use that. So similar thing to here. This time it will be tweet route. So tweets.js. So here we're going to do the same thing as well. We're going to call this API slash tweets. I'm going to do is a tweet route here. We have that tweet route here, right? So we have that set up, and it should be ready to go. First thing we're going to do is we're going to go back to our route one more time, and let's bring in some stuff that we might be using throughout this. So we're probably going to use our verify token again to delete some tweet. So right here, and then we can do is a JS right there. And let's see what else we need. We probably need the controller. So whatever controller we are trying to bring in. So let's say we start with a router.post. So we are trying to post a tweet. We'll make sure we post it on the route root directory, and then we also verify token. We'll make sure the right user is logged in to create. We create tweet. Let's rename that create tweets. And in here we're gonna create the create tweets here. So export pause create tweet. There we have it. And on here we're going to import that from the controller. So import create tweet from our controller. So tweet.js. So we have that working. So every time we go through this post request on our index, I'm going to delete that, delete everything else. So make sure we have only the stuff that we need to work with. So every time we hit the API slash tweets, we're going to have a post request, and that post request is going to verify our user. If is our user logged in or not, if it's the right user, then we're going to create a tweet. So let's jump back to our controller and start making that happen, right? So we're going to do is go back to the tweet, And here we're gonna do is we need a couple of things again. We need the tweet in order to create a new tweet. So import tweet from, let's say, models slash tweet.js. So in here we have this exported. We're going to bring that in here and we're going to create a new tweet. So const new tweet is equal to new tweet. Here we're going to request that body. So in our body we have a description in the form. We're going to put that into our tweet. Then we're going to try and save it. Try catch. And then we're going to do is const save tweet is equal to await new tweet dot save. And we have that. We need to make sure it's async await function. Once we have that, we're going to do res.status 200, and we're going to save tweet, pass in the save tweet. If we catch an error, we want to make sure we bring in the handle error that we created before. So we have that, and here we're going to do is create handle error, and then we're going to do is 500, pass in the error. So we are creating a tweet here. One more time, const new tweet is basically grabbing this from our schema and then passing in the body in here, which is basically going to be a description. And await is going to saving the tweet, and we're passing in the saved tweet over there. So let's jump back into it. Since we have this verification going on, we want to make sure we have a token that we can work with. So let's create another file in here so we keep everything tidy. Delete that. So we have auth user, not a run collection. Add a folder. We're going to do is tweets. Inside that tweet, we're going to call a request post tweet. I'll create a tweet. I think that makes a bit more easy to understand. Post request, and in here let's copy this just in case. I mean, yes, we're gonna do here is tweets API slash tweets slash whatever. In here we want to make sure we are logged in, so we have Harry as a logged in user. Copy his access token, pass that in here, so Harry is logged in. And then on here we're gonna pass in our description. So we wanna, so when we are creating the new tweets, remember we have a couple of things that need to be required. Is like user ID is required, and we have a description required. So in the body we need to pass in the user ID, so who's creating the tweets, and we also need a description. So let's jump into that. We want to have a JSON. User ID need to be, let's say Harry is creating this tweet, and then in here we're going to have a description of, let's say I want to be in Gryffindor, right? So Harry's first tweet right there. So that's I think hopefully this is gonna work out as expected. So Harry is logged in, he have the token, he gonna have this stuff. Let's do a post, finger crossed it works. So we have the tweet working. So the tweet basically use the user ID. This is a Harry Potter's user ID. I think, yeah, Harry's user ID. And then I want to be in Gryffindor. So this ID is basically the tweet's ID. So the Mongodb created a underscore ID for the tweet itself and the timestamp as well. So let's refresh this. We have a tweet, and in the tweet we have first our very first tweet. I want to be in Gryffindor by Harry. By who? The user ID matches with Harry, so that's Harry's tweet. So we have a indication which user is creating which tweet, and we can like play around with that in our front end UI as well. So that out of the way, let's Let's create couple more of these. So next we're going to do is right here. So let's create, I'm gonna name it create tweet. Next we want is delete tweet. Dot delete. What I have is we want to make sure we have an ID of the tweet. We also verify the user who's trying to delete, and delete tweet is the name of the controller. And we'll drag from the controller and go back to tweet. Copy paste that. Create a controller delete tweet. So in the delete tweet, we're gonna do a couple of things. We want to find the tweet, so we have our ID that we can work with, right? So we want to make sure we're able to find that, and we also want to update, check the user as well. So let's find the tweet first. I'm going to delete everything in here. So let's do everything in try catch block. And in the try catch, we're going to get the tweet first. Await tweet dot find by ID. And in here, because params ID. So in the params, we're gonna have the ID of the tweet, which is going to be this underscore ID here. That's the tweet ID. This ID is a user ID, so make sure you know how you differentiating that. In this case, we're going to be using the tweet own ID. So we have that in here, and we can work with that in our controller. So in here, if tweet dot user ID matches request dot body user ID, that means if the owner of the tweet matches with owner of the user who's logged in, then we should be able to delete the tweet. If not, we shouldn't be able to delete it. So here we're gonna do is await tweet dot delete one. So that tweet will be deleted, and then we're going to status 200 JSON tweet has been deleted, right? If not, if else, if that means you need to log in, right? So we can create an error in here, or handler, call it handler 500 error, which is basically going to be you need to log in, and here we're going to be doing pretty much the same error as well. So to clean things up, I deleted a little bit of the old tweet, and we don't have any tweets right now. We have only Ron. So let's log in using Ron and then play around with his tweets. So Ron W, his password is also Ron W. Logged in. So we have cookies here. We can create a tweet with Ron's stuff, and then here's my name is Ronald. User ID is Ron user ID over here. Get back to our Postman, and we post a tweet. So tweet is posted. Now we want to delete that tweet. So all we have to do is we make sure we're logged in using Ron's ID, and we pass in the ID as Ron, which is going to be this right here. And then this should be Ron's tweet. So we have the user ID for Ron's tweet. So delete. So look like the request is not working or passing properly. We can go back to this one more time. We probably missed something in here. So async await, we have tweet await to find by ID. If user ID is equal to body.user, there should be ID in here, right? So this is the ID we're passing in. I don't know why we put user ID there. So it should be working now. Let's a tweet has been deleted, and let's refresh this. the tweet is deleted, Ron is there. So that works out. We were able to delete the tweet. We had a small hiccup here. Make sure you know what we're doing here. Because um, I've changed this to user ID in here, but it should be ID because we have ID in here. So we're grabbing the ID from the body. So that's out of the way. And just to like or dislike a tweet, it should be similar. So it should be all in one. So we don't have to create two different routes for like and dislike. And because if we click one time, we should like it. If it's not liked, we should dislike it. It's a feature that Twitter use. So same thing we're gonna be trying to build as well. So here, let's do like or dislike a tweet dot put, and in here we're gonna do is again ID. This time we're gonna do is go to the like. If it's like, we can also do the dislike as well. So like or dislike. We don't need to verify this, so user will be logged in anyway. So we have done that, and let's grab that from the controller. In the controller, let's create something like that. So for the like and dislike, what we are going to be doing is I'm going to get rid of all that. So we are going to first get the tweet. Let's just go to await tweet find.params.id exactly. So we have ID over here. We're going to grab that, find that from our tweet, and then we are going to do is if the tweet dot likes includes this user, the logged in user, right? Then we're going to await and update the tweet, update one, and we're going to push. Yeah. So if it's not liked, right? If the tweet dot likes include this user and we have an exclamation mark, so if it doesn't include that user in the likes, we are going to be pushing that user onto the likes. So likes dot request dot body dot id, right? So we have a tweet, and we in the likes the user does not exist. That means we should be able to push the user ID because he likes the tweet. And we're going to send rest.status dot JSON tweet has been liked. If not, else we're going to do the opposite. We're going to pull. We're going to await tweet dot update one, and we're going to be pulling everything here. Likes dot we're going to pull because that body dot user body dot id, and then we're going to paste in the same thing pretty much and say tweet has been disliked. So Twitter feature, you press the heart icon, it's gonna like. If you press it again, it's gonna unlike it automatically. So that's what we are doing it over here. And you should be able to like your own tweet too, but let's create another user and play around with that. So sign up. Let's create Harry P. Yep, password Harry. Oh, we made a mistake on the password. HARRP, but it's fine. We logged in using that, so we do Harry P. Password is RP, and then we post logged in. We get that, and then we create a tweet. Let's see. We don't have a tweet. We create a tweet with his token. I want to be in Gryffindor, right? I want to be in Gryffindor. And then his user ID is let's see, what's his user ID, and send it So we have a tweet. And let's say we have Ron as well, right? Now Ron logs in and he want to like that tweet. So Ron logs in, get his token, and let's to like slash dislike tweet. Here we're gonna do is access token Ron token, and are we using any ID? I think we might not be using an ID, but I'll pass in. We're using an ID, so yeah. So we're put, and we'll go to that one more time. In here, remember we did something like this slash like. So in here we have the tweet ID slash like, and let's say the tweet ID is this. Oops, we have that, and for our data we have raw JSON. It's gonna have something like our Ron ID, so we know you haven't liked it before, so we wanna like it for the first time. So Ron have a different ID, so this is his ID. So this should be working. Last time for the tweet has been liked. I'll go back to the tweet. There is one liked, and you see Harry is the user ID who created that tweet, but Ron liked it, which is Ron ID over here. So liked by Ron. So we can keep track of that using that, and it's working perfectly as well. Next we are going to do is we're going to do 3 more things. We need like a timeline. Before we move on, I just noticed one thing. Like when you're deleting a user, we also want to delete their tweet, right? So I think that makes sense. So I'm going to go back to the delete user and try to update that as well. So we have user and delete user. So when we're deleting a user, we also want to delete their tweet as well. So we want to bring that in from there, right? So where is the delete user? And await tweet dot remove. So we remove everything made by that user. So user ID request dot params dot ID. So find the user and delete it, and also find all the tweet made by that user and delete it. So delete user should have both in there. So that's out of the way. Let's jump back into our tweet timeline and create a couple more stuff. This one would be get all timeline tweet. The timeline tweet is all the tweet that I tweeted out, and also all the tweet that the user I'm following, they tweeted out. So my following user and my tweets will all be in one timeline. So that's going to be router.get in here timeline underscore slash ID. And here we're going to do is get all tweet. We're going to the controller, and on the controller we're going to create this, type that in. So here we're going to do a couple of things. First, we are going to find the current user. So we want to make sure we grab our stuff from here. So because we need some information from our user. So all we'll do is user model.js, and in here we're going to do is current user is equal to await user dot find by ID. Why we need current user? Because we need to find who are we following, so we can grab their tweets, and we're going to do const user tweets. So this is my tweets is equal to await tweet. Let's define here, and we're going to do is user ID is current users dot underscore ID. So that's that. And then we're gonna do is we're gonna grab followers ID. So all the people we are following, we're gonna grab their tweets. Followers tweets is equal to, oops. So we have that. Await promise dot all. We're going to use the promise, get all of their tweets, and we're going to do is current user dot following dot map. So we are going to map through all our current user follower ID. This is the follow all the people we are following, their ID, and then we're going to do is return tweet dot find. We're going to go to the tweet and find their tweet. So ID is equal to followers ID. So one more time, we're doing a promise.all, and then we're going to go through all our followings. So all the people we are following, we're going to go, and then what we're going to do is find the tweets using all the followers ID. So user ID is equal to follower ID. We're going to grab that, all going to be stored in here. After that, we are going to be returning this. So 200 JSON user tweets dot concat. So we're gonna concat our tweet with the followers tweet, so we have all in one place. So my tweet plus their tweet is going to be joined in together, and then we're gonna concat in here, and then we return that. So for example, we're gonna create a few more tweets for sure. Let's Harry, we are on a Harry right now, so let's create another tweet. Let's go to Hagrid, tweet. Let's sign in using, oh, that's wrong. So let's sign in using Harry in here. Sign in, we grab his token, and we create some more tweets using his token. And user ID will be Harry's user ID. And there you go. Trying to learn new spells. Post it. So we have a couple of tweets, and then we have, oh, these are all by the same user. We didn't logging using Ron, so let's logging using Ron here. Ron W and create some tweet using Ron's token here. Let's see, user ID would be Ron's user ID here. What we're trying to do is I hit spiders. So Ron have one tweet, right? Just double check. That's Ron. User, no one is following no one, but we need to follow someone. So we are logged in using Ron. So let's follow Harry right now. So grab his token, follow Ron, and then user ID should be Ron's user ID here. I'm gonna follow Harry. So Harry's user ID is there. So there, following the user. So let's go back, check Ron is following Harry or not. So he's following Harry, Harry's follower, Ron is on Harry's follower list. So we have that. So next we are going to be doing is we're going to checking this out, get all tweets. So we have this over here. So timeline / ID. So let's do get timeline tweets. And we're going to be very similar timeline / ID. So timeline slash ID would be Ron's ID. So grab that properly and here. So we are passing in anything on here. Let's check API slash tweet. So we have to go with tweet. And then timeline slash Ron's ID. And we are getting all my tweets and then also Harry's tweet as well. So it's working fine. That's perfect. Let's unfollow Harry, right? Just to see if it's working properly. So a lot of process, but ID should be Ron's ID. And unfollowing Harry, right? So there we have it. Unfollowing the user. Now let's get all the tweets. Only Ron's tweet is there. Harry's tweet is gone because we unfollowed Harry. So that's working great. We have a couple more things that we want to add in here. We want to add our own tweet. We want to only get our own tweet. User tweet only. So router.get user slash all slash ID. In here, get user tweets. We need to bring that in from controller as well. Go back to our controller. I just duplicate that. Add that in. Get user tweet. This one should be a little straightforward, so you guys can implement that in yourself. Just an exercise, try it out, pause the video, and come back to my kind of implementation. So, yeah, straightforward again. Const user tweets. We go to await tweet dot find. User ID should equal to request.params.id. But this time we want to sort. We want all our liked tweet to be on the top. Or the latest tweet to be on the top. Sort. And then we want to have our latest one to be on the top. So created. Remember when you go to the tweet, there's something called created at. So when was the tweet created? We're going to do that. Go to -1. So tweet.find, find all the tweet, and then we're going to use the sort method to kind of sort it with the latest one to be on the very top. So we can, when we go to the profile, we have all our latest tweet on the top. So do that, pass in the user tweet, and yeah, that's it. That's get our user tweet. Pretty straightforward. Next we're going to do is explore. In the explore, we're going to have all the tweets from all the user, even on the one we don't follow. So here we're going to do is explore in here. So router.get explore. Get explore tweet. Here we're going to do is we want to get explore tweet, and on the thing here, do this. So get explore tweet going to be very similar as well. We're going to do some sorting too. So await get explore tweet is equal to await tweet dot find. We're going to find all the tweets, and that's it's been liked. So if the like is true, we're going to get all the tweets that have likes, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do some kind of a sort, and most liked tweet should come on the top because we're exploring it. I want to make sure the best popular tweet is on the top. So likes -1 means the highest likes should be on the top. So same thing again, we're grabbing all the tweets that have likes. Exists, it's not exist, it should be exists. Like exists true, and then we're sorting it to the highest level. So let's try this out. on the Postman. So what first thing we did was get user tweet. So let's go back to our Postman. Come in here. Get get user tweet. User tweet should be similar to timeline, but this time what we are doing in here is user all /id. So let's get that. We are getting all the Ron's tweet. You can also get all the Harry's tweet. Let's see here. We're getting all Harry's tweet. And then we're going to do is explore. So if you go to explore, we're just going to get all the tweets in our application. There we go. So all our tweets in there. And it's also expanded by likes. So if it's liked, it's going to be on the top. If it doesn't have any like, it should be at the bottom. So that's also taking in place. I think so far that works out pretty well for our backend. Let's go check if we need to do anything. I think that's it. So we have everything. We have user, we have tweets, we have authentication, all worked out. If you guys got stuck in one of these, make sure you go back and watch the video. In the next part of the video series is going to be really awesome. We're going to bring in React. We're going to design exactly like the Twitter website using Tailwind CSS. And then we're going to be slowly bringing all this route that we created into our front end, so we can fetch all the data, we can create a tweet, we can do all this stuff that we created using front end UI with React. So the next video, stay tuned for that. In the meantime, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and join my Discord server. I just started a Discord server. If you guys join, it will be really helpful to keep everyone connected there. And yeah, see you on the next part of this course.